right. I've got Galel Fajardo hanging out with me today. How you doing, Galel?
What's up, my brother? Good to see you.
Good to see you, dude. So I wanted to talk to Galel today and make sure that you guys had some conversation with him here because I mean his brain is amazing. It's amazing to hear him speak and learn more of what he's learned and the shifts that he's had. And so I wanted to be able to transfer some of this just from our coaching calls to everybody.
Yeah.
Galel is a high performance business coach, and we talk all things mindset, high performance, making money, marketing, discipline, freedom, all these amazing things. Um, so I know how amazing Galel is, but Galel, if you could give the people the why should I give a crap about listening to this guy, what's your answer for that?
So my first thing is that I'm a normal guy who's had a lot of abnormal experiences that has learned from many mistakes that I've made, and I keep getting better and use those learnings to help improve the lives of other people. I'm super, super passionate, as you know, Rusty, to help and empower entrepreneurs to become their best version of themselves, right? To kind of take that mindset shift where, all of us spend time scrolling on social media, even if we don't, pretend to, we use it as a marketing tool and we play this game where we begin to compare ourselves to other people. And I want to kind of shift the mindset where we stop putting the focus outwardly and we shift the focus internally and see what can I do myself to improve and just get better every single day. So that's a big theme of mine, right? It's like
Mm-hmm.
improving daily was like is like the main thesis, right? If like I joke that one day, when God punches my library card and I'm out of here, is like this visual of like almost a construction cone that like my whole life I've just been under construction, and we all are constantly under construction, right?
Yeah.
And it's okay to take a couple steps forward, take a couple steps back, but as long as we keep our sights set forward, we're moving there. I've lived all kinds of crazy experiences in my life, so I don't know if we want to get into any of that stuff. But
Yeah.
basically, I'm here as a student teacher, right?
Yeah.
I'm constantly learning about myself, constantly trying to get better, and then applying those to help other people be able to breathe a little bit easier in their life through
Mm-hmm.
some of my mentorship and my coaching.
Heck yeah. And why? Like what started you down this? But like why is it that
Yeah.
Galel has such a passion for helping people improve like this?
Yeah, so in my early 20s, I went through a really rough period of life. It was, I started to get panic attacks, started getting woken up in the middle of the night with these panic attacks and horrible anxiety, which led to depression and led to some really, really dark thoughts. And I thought I was just broken as a human. I was like, man, my wife screwed up marrying me. And I had reached a level of financial success that I wasn't prepared for, because growing up, having grown up in a poor home, and then like making multiple five figures a month as an early 20 something, I thought that was going to bring me happiness. And so it was this thing. I was like, wait a second, I just made 33K in 1 month. Why do I feel like shit still?
Mm-hmm.
And thinking maybe if I make 50K a month, I'll feel better. Or maybe if I put 100,000 in the bank, I'll feel better. And then my mindset kind of shifted to the opposite. Well, it's like, well, shoot, if money doesn't bring me happiness, maybe no money will bring me happiness. And so I went and like literally we drained everything. We lost all of our money as a result of the financial collapse in 2007 and 2008. And I was on the complete opposite swing. And so I knew what it was like to be penniless. And I was happy about my son being born. He was born in 2008, but I was miserable because I couldn't pay our bills. And I went, okay, so making money and I was unhappy. Now I have no money and I'm unhappy. How about we shift this to where I'm making money and I'm happy? Let's try to go down that route. And so I got involved into the world of personal growth and personal development. I started like getting mentors, and they started encouraging me to read books and listen to audios. And so that's what, you see the shelf behind me is just filled with a lot of those books that I learned and audios that I listened. And I realized I learned the concept of neuroplasticity, right? The fact that our brain can actually change over time. And if we feed it new ideas and new concepts, like our brain can literally create brand new connections. So I became obsessed with human psychology, wanting to improve myself. But the big takeaway from those really tough times that I experienced was, okay, this sucks. This was a really rough time, but how do I use this crappy time in my life to serve as many people as I possibly could? And quite frankly, Rusty, like I don't have enemies in life. Well, I take it back. I have one enemy, that's complacency. But if I, had enemies in my life, I wouldn't want my worst enemy to experience the feelings I was experiencing during that time. And so I said, if I can get better, and I can improve myself and learn new skills and learn new habits and change my life, how can I help other people avoid the same mistakes I made? Or if they're going through a tough time, with my story and my coaching and mentorship, help them live their best life. And so
Hmm.
that's why we're here today now.
Heck yeah. So what I'm hearing through that too is that like in those times, your strategy to get out wasn't um affirmations and constant gratitude work and just trying to positive think your way out of it.
Yeah, I did some of that work. I thought, when you are in like the depths of despair,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, gratitude helps.
For
Like,
sure.
hey, I have a roof over my head. I have running water. My wife didn't leave me. I had a lot of friends growing up, living here in Orange County, a lot of friends where as soon as they lost their ability to earn finance, they like earn their money and their finances were in a rough shape, their wives left them because they're like, well, what good are you to me? And my wife didn't do that. Emily leaned in and was like, how do I help you? I was like, well, unfortunately, I know I told you I wanted you to be a stay-at-home mom, but I need you to go get a job because nobody would hire me. I was having a really hard time finding jobs because my path had been as an entrepreneur. And so it taught me a lot about, it was very humbling, right?
Mm-hmm.
Taught me that, I had to go ask for help. Like my church literally had to like, they had to, they stepped in. They're like, we hear you're going through a hard time. Here's the process. You have to fill out this application. And so it's their benevolence fund. They had to literally like pay some of my bills for a couple months. That
Yeah.
was very humbling at the time, humiliating, but I'm so glad that I went through it because it gave me such appreciation.
Yeah.
But to answer your question, it wasn't just the gratitude journaling and the affirmations. I mean, it was actually doing work on myself to change things around.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I know this is kind of a theme around what you teach as well. So let's dive into some of that. Like you've
Yeah.
had all these experiences. Now you're helping other people out with these things. Like what are the your thought processes that help you get through tough times? How's that changed over time? And yeah, what's your approach when shit gets really hard?
Yeah. So I think first and foremost, what people need is they need like their own personal constitution, so to speak, right?
Mm-hmm.
And one of the themes I talk about a lot is sovereignty, right? Sovereignty is like the supreme rule of the land, right? That's like it's ownership, who rules what. And so I really think a lot of people look at the way that their lives are and they take a very hands-off approach and they are just simply reacting to life circumstances.
Mm-hmm.
And are there things that are out of our control? Yeah, there's a hell of a lot that's out of our control, but there's also a hell of a lot that is within our control. And when you control those things that are within your control, it gives you such an immense first off, it's a huge responsibility, number one. But number two, it is so empowering when you realize that you can truly be sovereign over your life. And that makes some people uncomfortable because they're like, oh, well, wait a second. You think you're just going to take control over everything. And it's not that. For me, as Rusty, my personal belief is I have a personal relationship with Jesus Christ. And so part of my sovereignty is living my life in alignment with the values that I have learned through Jesus,
Mm-hmm.
and so yeah, so I have sovereignty over my life, but my supreme being, my supreme ruler, is God. And so that's what it looks like for me. It's going to look different for other people. And so like establishing for me like the hierarchy as far as like what's important and how I go about living my life has been instrumental for me, because now I'm basically living my life on my terms that are in alignment with my value system. Right. So
Hmm.
it's not a Galel first mindset. That's not what sovereignty means. Sovereignty means living life the way that you deemed necessary and fit for your life. So for me, God's number one. And so my values are aligned with God. I'm in tune with God. I'm regularly communicating with God and
Yeah.
asking God questions, right? That kind of lead me in a certain direction. But having sovereignty over your health, having sovereignty over your marriage or your romantic relationships with your children, the values that you're teaching them, the type of business that you want to run. And that's where a lot of my coaching kind of focuses on, is for entrepreneurs. That something that I learned from you was that it doesn't have to be hard to make a living, and you can do so in a way that's actually really fun. And
Yeah.
so kind of like that concept of what Joe Polish talks about, of having elf clients, right? Easy, lucrative, and fun. And the fact that now that I've focused on that, I know which clients are going to be easy to work with, they're going to be lucrative, and that are willing to pay me the rates that I charge, and they're going to be fun to work with. They're going to be pleased in paying my higher rates. Could they
Hmm.
get a cheaper coach somewhere else? Of course they could. But I want to work with people that are willing to invest a big sum of money into their life and in their business, because they're going to be all in on the process. And so
Hmm.
all that relates to your sovereignty, your freedom.
And why a loop that's kind of opening in my brain, or maybe in a concept that's connecting in my brain as you're saying this is, earlier you talked about like, yeah, it starts here with me, right?
Mhm.
I'm the one that has to take control first, and then the other
Yeah.
stuff happens. Then you also talked about, well, I want clients who are easy, lucrative, and fun, right? Or other people around.
Yeah.
The reason that Galel gets elf clients is because he's the example,
Yeah.
right? Like, you work your tail off on being easy, lucrative, and fun to be around.
Yeah.
And so people want to be around you, and therefore they love that their life is more easy, more lucrative, and more fun because they're in your presence,
Hmm.
right? And so the thought of living your values and being the example is the thing that like gives you that elf lifestyle, that elf easy, lucrative, fun set of clients and business partners and people around
Yes.
you and friends, and suddenly the people in your family start to get easier to deal with. Like, what's all
Yes.
that about?
Yeah.
um right, it just, when we clean up our side of the street, isn't it nuts what can shift?
Yes. And the key element in this, Rusty, is self-awareness, right?
Hmm.
And the best people that I work with are very self-aware, right?
Yeah.
So it's, for a long time, one of the things that I struggle with that you helped me with was this notion that, I get uncomfortable in situations, and when I get uncomfortable, I talk a lot.
Hmm.
And you kind of challenged me on that, and you said, well, do you really talk a lot? And I'm like, well, yeah, in some instances I do. Okay, so what's behind that? Right? And behind that were some insecurities that I had, that if I said a couple sentences and left it at that leaves a lot for interpretation. And I was afraid of how people would view me and judge me. And so it's like, that's just one little sliver of an element of how like self-awareness is. Also, diving into your personal habits. So like one of the things, so I've developed what I've called the sovereign success system. And one of the elements of the sovereign success system is diving into like the deep, dark parts of your life that maybe we don't necessarily want to take a peek at, but they're important, because these deep, dark areas of our life, they can be an energy suck. They can be a time suck. They can have this ripple effect on your life that takes you away from your ultimate goal. And so when I became very self aware of my negative things, those deep, dark areas that I didn't want to talk about, when I started lifting up those rocks and seeing these things scatter around like bugs, when we were kids, we're lifting rocks, you find bugs. That's what it is in your life. And when you can become self aware on that, you can go, oh, okay, so I've got these like bad habits that I have. Okay, Galel, like let's not like be harsh on ourselves right now. Let's call it for what it is. You have some bad habits. What can you do to change those bad habits? And what is the effect of changing the bad habit? What's it going to do? And that's where the real freedom comes in. You
Yeah.
realize, like, man, like, okay, there's a reason why I'm doing certain things. There's a reason why I'm numbing myself, whether it's with food or alcohol or porn or sex or validation or greed or envy, you name it, right? Like everybody, there's a litany of things that we can get caught up in, but
Mhm.
that's where the real freedom starts.
Definitely, definitely. As you went through that list, I'm thinking about the ice cream tub that's in my freezer right now. I'm like, I can't wait
Yeah.
to like, ooh, it's so good. That's a different time. But so I'm curious as well, because and we all of us have, these the bugs under the rock, right? The things we
Yeah.
don't want to look at, the bad habits.
Yeah.
And especially as self-aware people, we know that we can change,
Hmm.
but then like, sometimes we don't. So
Hmm.
what's going on there? Like, what do you see with clients that keeps them from actually, handling these things? What are their
Yeah.
objections to moving forward to a better life?
Yeah, so I mean, sometimes it's reframing the way that you look at certain things. And so some people it's, well, that's just the way that I am. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
we get labeled with something, whether it's as children or, maybe it's a relationship you're in, a boyfriend, a girlfriend says something to you, a husband, a wife says, oh, well, it's just because you're lazy, or that's just because you're just like your father, right? Or whatever
Mm-hmm.
it is that somebody can like cast out at you, and it leaves an imprint on your mind.
Yeah.
And the fact is that one of the things that I've learned is your brain does not like to be a liar. It's one of the reasons why polygraph tests work so well, because there are physical changes that happen in your body when you're not telling the truth.
Yeah.
And so your brain, if you make a declarative blanket statement, your brain is going to make all the connections it can to bring that into reality and to make that like, oh, you're lazy? You say you're lazy? Okay, cool. Like, we're going to make sure that you're lazy then because we don't want to be a liar. And
Mm-hmm.
so it's recognizing those negative things and then asking the question why, being curious. And I call it, peeling the layers of the onion, right? Where it's
Mm-hmm.
like, well, why is it that I'm drawn to this? And then you peel a layer back and it's like, okay, like let's use porn for one. Let's dive right into like one of the like nasty
Yeah.
ones that's very common, right? It's like,
Mm-hmm.
why porn? Oh, just because I have a high testosterone level and I need an outlet. Okay, but there's other outlets for that. Why porn? And you pull the layer back, and it's like, well, I don't get rejected when I go and I watch porn, versus if I go to my spouse, they could tell me no, right? Ooh, possible rejection. I'm afraid of rejection. So there I'm the internet, the 30 tabs open are never going to reject me. It feels good. Sexual pleasure feels good. Well, yeah, it does. Okay, cool. But, what is it that you really want beyond sexual pleasure? And then it's like you peel the layer of the onion back. You're like, well, I just want to be like validated and I want to know that I'm like worth something. And then you pull the layer of the onion back and you're like, well, are there maybe areas of your life that you're not receiving the validation that you want? Are there
Mm-hmm.
areas of your life, are there communications that you need to have with your spouse that tell you that you are physically attractive to them, that they care about you, that they're turned on by you? Like what is, and so that is where you get into the really fun stuff. Because as you pull each layer down, you realize you're like, oh, okay, so I turned to porn because I don't feel like I'm validated. I don't feel like my needs are being met. Um, you know, and because, I grew up with the internet and, my first exposure was at age 10 on the internet, and an internet, experience is way different than finding magazines behind the dumpster. And then you learn about the science behind it and realize it is made to be so highly addictive to you, and you learn the biology behind it, and then it makes it so much easier to be able to let go of some of these bad habits when you realize the why behind it, the why you want to do it, and then why it's made to be so addicting. So it
Mm-hmm.
kind of reduces that feeling of guilt of like you're just a bad person or you lack discipline. It's like, actually, I'm hooked on the internet because it's made to be that addicting. I'm hooked on social media because it's been designed by psychologists to make it more addicting. And then you start getting into the good stuff on how to start eliminating those things.
Hmm. And I know you've got, I mean, you got a master's degree in like performance psychology, right?
Yeah, yeah, that was very helpful because I felt, again, talking about validation. So I had
Hmm.
experience working with people, and I started to get people that were like, "Galel, can I just buy an hour of your time so I can get your advice on how to handle this?" And so I would like, say, "You know what, tell you what, just like buy me lunch and then we'll talk about your problems over lunch." One of the things that people told me is they're like, Galel, I have a bad taste in my mouth about Christians because Christians, by and large, is known as being very judgmental people, right? They're very judgy and they point
Hmm.
fingers at people. And, you know, what I've learned, and I've had really good pastors that have taught me about the fact that, yeah, as we're pointing to somebody else and their problems, like you've got three fingers pointed right back at you. And oftentimes, this is something that you taught me, we get triggered by other people, by stuff that's inside of us that bothers us, right? And
Hmm.
so they said, like, I had friends who said, Galel, like you're a Christian, but man, like there's no judgment in the way you talk to me and in the advice that you have or my problems that I bring to you. And so because of that, I've been able to really build deeper relationships with people because I'm a non-judgmental listening ear, regardless of how much is on that list of stuff that you're unhappy with. I'm not judgmental about it. And so having that master's degree helped me because in the work that we did, I got to talk to people during my clinical work, during my preparing my thesis, and I got to learn about, human depravity, human evil, the dark, deep recesses of human life and the horrible things that we as humans have done to other humans. And I got to see those aspects and then learn why it is that certain things happen. And so it was just a very powerful experience for me to get that kind of credibility. So I've got that very expensive piece of paper up there, but it served me really well because now I understand a lot more of how the brain works and
Hmm.
how the brain can change and optimize for performance.
Yeah, I love that. I've got 40 directions I want to go with that. Um, One, I would, if we could spend a moment on it, of like you mentioned, like porn or other addictions, they
Mhm.
get us addicted. There's a why behind it. And once we know the why, it helps us kind of loosen the grip on that
Yeah.
problem. Like what is going on in the brain? Like what are there certain neurochemicals that are firing? Are there certain
Yeah.
like walk from your perspective, what do you see happening there?
Yeah, so it's the most simple analogy I can give is like the experiments we've seen with rats in labs where the rat hits a button and cheese comes out. And so then the rat goes, okay. And then the rat goes and touches the button again and the cheese comes out. And what happens is the rat keeps touching the button because it knows it gets this reward every single time. And so our brain works that's the way our brain works, right? We do something and we get a reward, well, then we want to do it. Now, the reward, however, isn't always something physical. So, like with sex, hopefully the reward is an orgasm, right? Or a great experience. And I would argue orgasm should not be the object of sex every time, right? That's a whole other discussion for another time with you,
Yeah.
Rusty. But there is something you get out of an action, right? You drink alcohol and you get a good feeling. You drink too much alcohol and now you have the reverse happens, right? Or you scroll on social media and you feel good. And so a lot of things that we talk about, like a lot of stuff that we see nowadays is all about like, oh, we need dopamine detoxes, right? And I agree with that. Like too much dopamine after a certain amount of time, and that's the chemical that's being rushed through your brain. And so when you get accustomed to these really like big rushes of dopamine that start entering your brain says that feels really good. Let's keep doing it.
Mhm.
However, the beautiful thing about the way the brain is designed is that you can over time change what it is that you get dopamine rushes from.
Mhm.
So if it is, for example, pornography, you can logically begin to retrain your brain to not be drawn to it and actually be detested by it. I was just having a conversation with a gentleman on Friday who shared with me that he now like detests the taste of alcohol, and he'd been an alcoholic for decades, but
Mhm.
now it detests him. Or other people that I know in my life, coaching clients that are in recovery, where they a hard time comes into their life, and now they've managed to rewire their brains to not go for the bottle, but instead look to other solutions. And
Mhm.
so the brain has this ability to be able to change what it is that brings it those pleasures.
Mhm. Amazing. I love that. And I think that just kind of putting these threads together as well. Like when we have the addiction and we dig deeper and we find the reasons why, right? Like, okay,
Right.
I'm just addicted by the cheese coming out, right, of the thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, I get that positive hit, but every time I do that, I don't like the way I feel afterwards. Then we start looking more at the negatives, like, cool, what is
Yes.
the ripple effect of those? What's
Yes.
the pain that's building? What's the pain that caused this problem?
Yep.
Then we start to, from my perspective at least, get like addicted to that process,
Yes.
addicted to the growth, addicted to the
Yes.
like, oh, let me find another insecurity, let me like, oh, I
Yes.
really hate these love handles, I hate those, I love, cool, let's dig in,
Yes.
like what caused me to
Yes.
decide that I should have love handles, why am I eating
Yes.
that much?
Yes.
And then
Yes.
that growth suddenly becomes the dopamine hit.
Yes.
Right. I can't wait to
100%.
get in the gym. I can't wait till I can meditate. Like
Yep.
I sound like such a the 20-year-old version of me would be like, you idiot, where's your whiskey? I'm gonna go pour it down your
Totally.
throat. But,
Totally. Yes. You
now it's
nailed
like
it.
this is the real juice,
Mhm. Yep.
you
And
know?
and it is entirely possible. And it's not some hocus pocus like rubbing crystals, whatever. I mean, this is science,
Yeah.
right? And like for me, as being, you and I like joke around about how like we can sometimes come across as like woo-woo type people, right?
Mhm.
But it's like this is actual science, right?
Mhm.
The way that the brain works, it's finding out the why behind a certain thing. And sometimes it takes some real digging, and then replacing those habits with something else that you say, no, well, listen, this isn't serving me. This will serve me. And then you get excited about that process, and then
Mhm.
you just want more of it.
Yeah, definitely. And one thing, one of my little triggers that shows up once in a while is when we talk about science too. I'd love to point this out because we are taught, especially in marketing, right? Like we should be leaning on data, scientific
Yes.
facts,
Yes.
studies. And I'm just
Yes.
like, well, you know what? I did a lot of that and didn't get the results I wanted.
Yes.
And so what you and I know focus on a ton with all of our clients is, okay, yeah, but regardless of the science, does it get you the result you need?
Right. Yes.
Right.
And the fact is, again, science can be manipulated, right? There's
Mhm.
this big concept, and it's very controversial, that what is truth, right? And how I heard there was a politician this past week who said that like the United States should establish a truth board to verify claims that people make, and say whether that's truth or not. And the fact is that truth actually is not universal,
Right.
right? And that requires humility, right? To be able for somebody to be able to come and challenge your belief on something and say, hey, that's truth, okay, for you, but are you experiencing life the same way as this other person or this other person, right?
Mhm.
And yes, we want to make data-driven decisions with marketing, for the most part, but one of the things that you have taught me is to trust my instincts as well. If
Mhm.
something doesn't feel right, I got to lean into that. Don't run away from it, but lean into why doesn't that feel right? And asking myself that question versus old version, 1.0 version of me would be like, ooh, I have a yucky feeling about it. I'm going to run away. Problem shows up. No, don't focus on the problem. Let's like look over here. And one of the things that you've taught me to do is there's a problem. Let's focus on the problem. Let's examine the problem, because the problem is going to teach us something about ourselves, maybe our biases and how we're looking at certain things,
Mhm.
right? So, again, I think one of the things that helps me is that I'm just a naturally skeptical person. Anybody knows my political philosophy is like, I want the government to leave me alone, right? I want to be sovereign over my life, not
Mhm.
the government, right? Which is why sovereignty like ended up being like a great term that describes what I try to coach people on. And it's like, no, like let's dig in. Let's take charge and let's see what is actually there. So when I see a study that gets published, or when I was in grad school and I was reading all these peer-reviewed studies, double-blind
Yeah.
placebo tests, my question goes, well, wait a second, what's the bias of the researcher here? What's
Yeah.
the bias? What are they trying to sell? What are they trying to focus on? Because everything has an agenda, right?
Mhm.
Everything has an agenda. Our brain has an agenda. Our brain wants to keep us safe. And so if we can challenge and talk to our brain, take control and be like, listen, brain, I know this is going to be a little bit scary for you, but I promise this is going to be a good thing. And then you dive into the problem, it starts to unveil so many other areas of opportunities for you.
Huge, huge. Yeah, and I think that that's one of my favorite quotes about this kind of mental model around getting skeptical and seeing the different perspectives. Comes from Star Wars Episode 3. A Sith, only a Sith deals in absolutes, like what is
Yes.
truth and what is not.
Yes.
So don't be a
Yes.
Sith, be a Jedi. Think critically.
Yes.
Like,
Think
what are the
critically.
40 other perspectives that you're not considering right now?
Absolutely. And what are the 40, 50, 100 other solutions to the problems that you could be
Mhm.
facing, right? So it's like one of the things I remember you and I talking about in my business was like, I was sitting there like banging my head against a wall, thinking that there was just one means that I was gonna go and be successful at something. And you said, well, what if there were actually other means? What if there was 10 different streams of income that you could tap into? It's like,
Mhm.
wait a second, that seems like I talked to other people about that, but I didn't even think about that for myself, right? Like being curious and being okay with being curious.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I'm reading right now, Poor Charlie's Almanac, Charlie
Oh,
Munger's book.
yes,
Oh,
yes,
absolute gold for this idea. And he literally lays out these different perspectives to think through that have worked well for
yes,
him. So I'm thrilled about I've always been thrilled about the idea of different perspectives, new ways to look at it, playing devil's advocate just for fun, like,
yes. Just for fun.
which
Yep.
definitely pisses some people off, but it's okay. Um, if they're triggered, that means they have some work to do, right? So we're
Right.
doing them a service by pissing people off, right?
100%.
So yeah, so many different ways to look at it. And so if we wanted to start looking at any of our own problems or puzzles with the lens of like sovereignty,
Yes.
right? That's not something that I like. That's not a term that I tend to use.
Yeah.
Um, I don't like rules. I hate rules. I like to,
Yeah.
if you give me a rule, I don't want it. Like I
Yeah.
need to break it until I decide that it's my rule. At least that's the way I'm living right now. So I'm curious, like, how does the lens of sovereignty help us solve stuff?
Yes. So, um, I also am not a fan of rules. If somebody tells me that I need to do something, immediately I say, the hell are you talking about?
Yeah.
Why? Why should I follow that? And what I've learned over time is that rules or order don't exist to restrict us, right? One of the, and again, like I know that we have a very mixed, diverse audience of people that are going to be listening to this. So I'm just going to share my personal perspective. But one of the like verses that I always go back to where Jesus says, like, I came so people would live life and live it in abundance,
Mm.
right? Live life abundantly. And there's some people who have a very narrow view of what abundance is. They just think, oh, so you're here just to get rich. It's like actually abundance I view as more than you need in all aspects of life, right? So that means great lifestyle, great health, great relationship with your children's, an amazing relationship with your spouse, great sex,
Mm.
great vacations, great philanthropy and service to your fellow human, awesome dogs and animals, and being able to like live just big, right?
Mm.
Live big and live in abundance and just in all aspects and happiness and love and all these wonderful things in life. And so for me, Rusty, I view rules as not like, okay, Galel, you're going to be in this 13-foot by 13-foot cell, and these are the things that you have to abide by. Instead, I view it as I'm in Montana and I've got a 400 square acre ranch that I can do whatever the heck that I want inside those 400 acres.
Yeah.
right? Or 1,000 acres, or whatever it is that visual you want to paint in your mind. And so when you establish your personal constitution, your personal guidelines, it gives you so much room to be able to maneuver inside of
Mm-hmm.
versus thinking, oh gosh, if I set up rules for myself, I'm going to have handcuffs on me. I'm not going to be able to operate in this. It's quite the opposite. It's almost that notion of like what Navy SEAL Jocko Willink talks about, where he talks about discipline equals freedom, and that's something that resonates with me. When you have your established set of guidelines, that gives you great freedom. It's like, Bedros Keuilian talks about his dog Cookie, which, by the way, I forgot to tell you, when I was at his office last week, he has a painting of Cookie in his office with a crown on it. And I was like, Arwen needs something like that. Mike needs
Yes.
something like that. It's badass, right?
Mandatory.
But Cookie is a German Shepherd, if I recall correctly. And
Yeah.
what he said is that like human beings are very often like canines, where if you do not give a canine a purpose, the canine starts just digging holes just because it's got nothing to do, right? If you don't
Yeah.
give it a toy to play with, you don't tell it not to dig holes, but you like give it toys and a purpose to run around in, to chase squirrels or do whatever, it'll just start digging holes because it needs something to do.
Mm-hmm.
Human beings do the same thing in our lives. When we don't have a purpose and we don't have a certain established set of guidelines, we start digging holes, but those holes end up being these bad habits that we develop because we need a purpose. We need to be able to do something. Right. And
Yeah.
so when we can get tapped into what your purpose is and what it is that's going to serve yourself and humanity, and what it is that the 2.0 version of Rusty Osborne looks like, or the
Yeah.
2.0 version of Galel, like that is when we have that discipline, man, it gives you the freedom to be able to do so many amazing things in life.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And one of the key pieces that resonated with me with what you just said is when you know your rules, you have your
Yes.
constitution. One of the
Yes.
most common problems that I see with entrepreneurs is that they're borrowing rules from somebody else.
Totally.
Right. So it's
Totally.
like, well, my business
Yes.
coach told me I have to have this morning routine. And then,
Yes.
the church told me I have to have this set up in my life. And then my parents
Right.
told me that this is how I have to set up like it's all these rules put on us from other people.
Yes.
Right. And so I
Yes.
think that distinction is critical. Like, please examine every single one of those rules that you were
Yes.
given and
Yes.
establish yours.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
What is yours?
What is yours? What is it that is established for you? Are there rules in my life that I don't necessarily like? Yeah, I'm sure I could point to a few.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure that there's times where, I want to stray from the quote unquote rules or guidelines that I have,
Yeah.
but the consequences of doing so would have a horrible ripple effect on my marriage, on my relationship with my children. And so I
Mm-hmm.
go, ooh, that would be a really bad rule to break. But
Mm-hmm.
also, I would encourage people, if they have their established set of rules, one of the processes is checking your rules and seeing, like, hey, are those rules serving you? One of the things I remember you and I will often joke about and talk about is the fact that, like, hey, the rules are just made up anyway. There are no rules and they're just made up anyway. And so checking over time, because as your life circumstances change, your thought process changes, and you may find like, actually, I'm going to give myself a little bit of leeway for this reason, and here are the consequences of that. And so it's always taking things the next step. What are the consequences of not having rules for certain things? In some
Mm-hmm.
cases, there's no consequences, but I would argue that there's generally, again, this is a kind of a law of science, right? A law of physics is that for every action, there is an equal or opposite reaction that takes
Mm-hmm.
place. And so
Right.
knowing what are the consequences of those decisions that you make, and then that changing and establishing what it is that works for you.
Definitely. Definitely. I'm running through my brain right now so one of my problems, we don't have to dive into it, but the thing that I'm kind of playing through my brain is my alarm goes off right now and I don't subscribe to the you must get up immediately
Mm,
idea. It's just
mhm,
like, if I'm tired, 10 minutes extra has served me greatly in the past. Sometimes an hour and a half extra has been exactly what I needed that day. So I don't
mhm,
want that. But also, there's a lot of days where I'm like, dude, getting up right at that time would have been great, or
mhm,
like, or only 10 minutes extra of sleeping instead of more. So what I'm hearing through this, if I was going to use this lens on here, is like, all right, so let's follow it to the second, third order. If I stay in bed an extra, let's say 20 minutes, like what are the consequences? What are the
Right.
consequences of that? So, like, I got to my first deep work chunk today 20 minutes later than planned. And then,
Mhm.
oh, I had to shrink my time frame for the next one, which was, a little less important for the day, but I really cared about doing that. And now,
Yes.
once I get to, my first work block is done, suddenly I'm like, just don't feel as good about the work I did.
Right.
And so now that's kind of stirring in my head today. I get on calls. I'm like, like if only I had gotten up. Right. And then I can, as I paint that picture, then I can switch. Okay. What are the consequences of like saying, no matter what, I wake up at 5:25 a.m.,
Yes.
non-negotiable, get up.
Right.
And
Right.
there are also negative consequences. Like, man, if I'm
Yes.
exhausted, that would suck. Like,
Yes.
I don't want to. And so
Yes.
then kind of painting the different directions, I can start to find the most aligned solution for me.
Correct. Correct. Because like I'll tell you, most mornings I'm up right away, but Sundays and Saturdays generally I'm not because I give myself a little bit of a buffer time, depending on how early I choose to work on Saturday. But
Mhm.
like yesterday, my wife and I stayed in bed an extra 45 minutes and it
Yeah.
was amazing. And I was like, we were better connected, we treated each other better and it was great. Like it's ended up serving us very well. Could I have been productive and like I've got, a project of cleaning up the bathroom a little. Could I have knocked out some of that early? I could have, but instead I did it while sitting on the couch watching football. My wife put stuff in a basket, said, go through this basket while you're watching football. Great. So it
Yeah.
had no negative consequence, right? But
Hmm.
be okay with asking yourself these questions and then figuring out what is it that serves you ultimately.
Hmm. Yeah.
And don't complain about the consequences also, right?
Yeah.
Because if you're like, well, no, I'm not going to get up and I'm just going to stay in bed an extra 30 minutes, there is no like you're making the conscious decision to lose out on 30 minutes of deep work, but then Rusty can't complain a week from now if he missed out on 30 minutes over 5 days and now the project's not done or you're not able to launch something like then we can't complain because we made our own bed and we have to sleep in it,
Yeah.
right? So
Right.
then it's like adjusting, okay, let's not do that. Let's try 15 minutes of screwing around and then get up, right? And limit it to
Yeah.
that. So again, you have to play with things and be adjustable. Be willing
Hmm.
to tweak and adjust things. Being living in the black and white does not serve us, right? Living in the shades of gray. This is like one of the biggest things that you taught me. The way that my brain is hardwired is like it's either this or that. Actually, it's not. There
Yeah.
are a lot of varying degrees. And what I found was I was taking other people's definition of what discipline means for them, and I was trying to apply that to my life. And the fact is, I think differently than some people. I live a different lifestyle. Like one of the people I love and admire is Daniel Woodrum. He's the head coach at Early to Rise, and he's been a great friend. He's like a brother. He's like a mentor to me. And there's things that Daniel does that I won't do
Hmm.
because we're just in different places in life, right? And I joke with him. I'm like, man, like, dude, I'm a mess compared to you. If I were to compare myself to you, right? But it's
Yeah.
just we're in different places in life, different lifestyle, different goals, different aspirations, right? And that's okay. It's perfectly okay for that.
Hmm.
And I think being okay with that is what a lot of people struggle with.
Yeah. Definitely. Definitely. And so let's dive into as we're kind of wrapping this up. I know you've got something coming up with your sovereign success system.
Yeah,
So tell us about that, like because I know people want to get more with Galel because you're a
yeah.
champion, and everybody please like get more of Galel. He is a game changer in so many people's lives, including
Thanks,
mine.
brother. Thank
Yeah.
you, brother. Appreciate that. Yeah, so I've got a master class that's going to be available for people. It's going to be live on my website at galel.com, where I would just encourage people to get on my email list there because I give coaching and I joke that I talk about things on that email list that's not going to get me canceled on social media because I can have more of a personal, connection with you via email. So I'm big on using my email list to talk about this stuff. And basically, this is going to be an evergreen masterclass that people will be able to purchase that basically just walks them through my sovereign success system. It's walking you through the different steps that are helping you figure out where are you today? Where is it that you want to be? And what is it that's keeping you from that? And identifying those things in a non-judgmental manner so that way we can get you living in alignment with the purpose that you want. And for some people who listen to this, they're like, well, I don't know what my purpose is. That's okay. We're going to help you figure that out in this.
Yeah.
And so after 90 minutes, they will have a very clear framework for how to be able to proceed and be able to go after the life that they want.
Heck yeah. Awesome. So we will include that information when we send this out. So that'll all be there. But at the end of the day, galel.com for all things Galel. And also Instagram at Galel Fajardo.
Yep.
And if you can't find him from that somehow, let me know and I will connect you. So I'll be checking that sovereign success system out as well. Clarity is a system. And
Yes.
so if clarity is a system, we need to use all the perspectives we can to get crystal clear. And so regardless of your current views on things, like this is another lens to which you can look through and find clarity on what you want out of life and the steps you're going to take to get it, especially how to eliminate the obstacles to your best success. So,
Big time.
yeah, so I'm thrilled about this. I'm stoked to check it out, and yeah, I'll keep the info around and make sure everybody's got that.
No, appreciate that. And again, this came about because of my work with you, like
Mhm.
being able to take my ideas and concepts. And I've been telling you forever, like, I got to have my own thing. I got to have something that I do.
Yeah.
Cause I create content. You and we make YouTube videos and we get on podcasts with people. And, I've spoken at mastermind events and all this stuff. But ultimately, I needed something that was duplicatable that I could just offer to the marketplace for people to be able to walk them through this system to just kind of accelerate their path. And ultimately I hope like people choose to work with coaches like you and me to be able to help them achieve these things. But at a minimum, this is going to be a system that helps people kind of figure out the mess, get clear on what's going on, and then give them a path forward, because I think ultimately that's what people need.
Heck yeah, exactly. I think that's one of the biggest things you and I see with all our clients is clarity
Yeah.
is key. If we don't have clarity of our very next steps, what are you doing in the next 15 minutes? You don't have enough clarity, right? Like,
Right.
so continuing to get that, and this is going to be a path for everybody to take. Um, yeah, it's going to be gold. I'm super stoked for it. And I'm not joking when I'm saying I'm going to be on this masterclass watching it and participating because I know the value here. And I mean, you've been hired by so many extremely successful people to implement this stuff, like 7 8 figure business owners. You like it's insane the amount of high level people that have hired Galel to coach them through these things. So just want to reiterate that it's not bullshit. It's real. Like this is real results oriented, results tested systems that we're putting or that Galel's putting together. So
Yeah.
uh,
And it's and I thank you for that, and it's very humbling, and old Galel would have really shied away from that and been like, "Oh no, don't mention that, Rusty, this, that." Like, no, but like because I have seen the impact that it's had on my life and I'm seeing the real results taking place with my 7 8 figure clients, it's like now it's go time. It's like
yeah.
now everybody's got to be a part of this. If you've got a cure for somebody for what ails them, you want to put it into everybody's hands. And so
Mm.
this is that elixir, I think, that will help, speak to that person who needs that clarity, wants to figure out, what's going on and what can be improved and having a plan moving forward. This is that for them. So I'm super excited about
Heck
doing
yeah.
that.
Amazing. Well, Galel, thanks for being here, brother. I appreciate you.
Thank you, brother. Appreciate this.
Awesome.